joining us for our FY25 budget deliberations. Hopefully this is the last one till the public hearing, but you never know. It's 10 a.m. and in attendance are Commissioners Brooks, Matari, and Duncan. Are there changes to the agenda? Okay, hearing none. Public comment. Okay, hearing none. Our first item, preliminary balanced FY25 budget update with Finance Director Brandy Falcon.
Good morning, Commissioners. Brandy Falcon for the record. So, as you know, at our last budget meeting, you had voted to publish the budget at a 2% tax increase. Since that time, I got a phone call from the state liquor board, and they informed me that our liquor revenues were going to be about $173,000 less than what we were expecting. The main reason for that is our general use liquor revenues are going down because total liquor sales statewide are down for the first time in 15 years. The liquor board's revenue is down $3 million. And then our magistrate liquor revenues are down because our percentage of liquor citations has decreased by 20% as a percentage of total liquor citations statewide. So I went ahead, and the clerk and I wanted to update those revenues in the budget since we have the information and still had time to meet with you one more time to get your approval to publish. So I've gone ahead and decreased the liquor revenues. I've also, since our last meeting, implemented the COLA into the accounting system. So that number has now been wrapped in with our personnel number up here. So that's why you're not seeing a separate line for the COLA anymore. And same with the positions funded by 50%. Those have all been adjusted and cut by 50%. So those savings have also been absorbed in this personnel line right here. So implementing those helps to mitigate the decrease in liquor revenues a little bit. So now at a 2% tax increase, we are $19,000 in the deficit. So we just needed some board direction on how you want to make up that $19,000. We could use fund balance somewhere, or you could cut something. I've also understand there might be a couple items the commissioners wanted to bring forward to talk about as well.
Okay, Bill, you want to go first? Bruce?
I don't have anything.
Okay.
Well, I guess I usually go first, so why break the streak here? One of the things that kind of stood out to me, and this is something that I think as a board we should talk about in the future, as far as how positions get reevaluated by HR. Apparently, in the budget, we have a line item for conversion of deputy director to a grade 14, and right now we have that position as a grade 12. And so, as a board, if we approve that, by default, we have approved this position. And, you know, if we're going to stop mid-year changes and all those kinds of things, I think what we need to do is maybe in mid-year start having discussions about conversions, what that means, and how that would impact next year's budget, and not trying to sneak these things in, hoping that, you know, the board says yes, and then by default. This is no different than what we saw with transit a little bit with this regrade or reclassification of a position. And so I would argue that we should talk about this position first before we start approving dollar amounts for a position that we don't even know what it is.
So if you're talking about the airport deputy director position,
Yes.
then, well, first of all, it's covered by airport revenue. Second of all, it was a position prior before it, let's see.
Well, actually, Phil's in it right now.
Correct, as part-time, but the actual deputy director position was back in 2020. I don't remember the history on that. There was one, then when Phil retired, then that position was gone away, and kind of two managing positions were created.
Yeah.
So,
but my point is, do you know what this position is? I mean, do you know what the description is for this position? Because we're approving dollars for it without knowing what it is.
Right, but budget authority doesn't mean spending authority, so we can have it in the budget, and we can still say no when it comes to us in an HR meeting. Well,
I guess the point being is that I'm just leery of approving dollars without understanding what I'm approving this stuff for. And, you know, I think that that's reasonable as kind of like gatekeepers for the budget. to understand what we're saying yes to. And right now, I don't understand that. And so I'm more of the opinion that we should be having this discussion of what this position is, why it's going from a grade 12 to a grade 14, what's involved with that, what's changed at the airport, what's changed for the director. Will this lead to triggering now a reevaluation of the director's position? What is the difference between the deputy director today versus the deputy director before? What's changed at the airport? I mean, yes, we have more volume, but what's changed?
Yeah, that's something you'd have to have a conversation with Gaston about. I imagine we can put it on for Thursday's HR meeting.
And there's one other thing too, and that is parity within the county. You know, that's something that we don't talk about very much, but we have to be very careful that when we take a position and reclassify it and give it a pay grade that's similar to someone else who's managing $10 million more, 40 or 50 more employees, that creates a disparity. And then we end up having what I call the Me Too movement in the county, where, well, what about me because I'm doing this, and what about me?
So HR actually does look at parity when they regrade everything.
Well,
so,
I
and
think-
Sylvia's here if you want to talk to her about it.
Well, I have questions about that because we've looked at some of these situations with transit that we're still working on. And I still have not been able to see the apples to apples comparison with the dollar comparison. I realize that they're not exactly an exact overlay with some of the similar type positions in other jurisdictions, but the responsibility level is way different. And it's not like I haven't done this stuff myself personally in the private sector. So I understand this stuff well enough, and I would like to see what it is that we're approving before we approve some of these things. And I think that these are more mid-year type discussions so that we understand to put them into the next budget versus putting it in the budget and then kind of making it just as a matter of fact, let's get through this, going through the motions.
Okay, so you want to cut that position then?
I didn't say position. I said I'm just trying to understand why it's going from a grade 12 to a grade 14 and why we're budgeting for that.
Okay.
I believe the position has been there, and Phil's filling that position right now.
Yeah, it was a temporary position.
Well, he's filling it. He's filling that spot. So in order for someone to go in, he has to step down, right?
Yes, and
Okay.
it's only part-time right now.
Well, either way, someone's filling the position.
Yes.
Thank you.
What would you like to do with it then?
I think, if anything, we should keep it wherever it is right now, which is a grade 12, and then have this discussion as to what's changed, why it's changed.
Does Thursday HR meeting work for you?
Sure.
Okay.
So in terms of voting today to publish the budget, are you wanting to make any changes to that airport request before you vote to publish? Or are you thinking you'll make a change later at the public hearing?
Well, what is your time frame right now as far as publishing and us meeting statutory guidelines?
So I have to publish by the third week of August. I don't really know if you consider the first 3 days of August a full week or not, but to be safe, I wanted to publish this week, which would mean I have to have it to the press by like today or tomorrow in order to run in the legals, which I think are on Thursdays. So I was hoping to have a vote today to publish the budget,
Okay.
but if there's further cuts that you want to make, but you need more information, we would have to schedule another budget meeting.
And again, approving this line item in the budget doesn't mean it's approved going forward. We still have opportunities to have that discussion on Thursday and make changes then.
Yeah, if you vote to publish today and you leave this request at a grade 14, and you later decide you either want to reduce it to a grade 12 or cut the request altogether, we can schedule another budget meeting between now and the public hearing to do the cut, or you can just make that cut at the public hearing at the end of August.
Yeah.
So you'll still have an opportunity to take it out if you want.
Well, what you need to publish, though, is a balanced budget, and so we either
Correct.
need to adjust the the tax rate or reduce the budget by the 19,000 and some change.
Correct, so I'll need you today to adjust by the 19,000. This position, since it's funded with airport dollars, if you cut it at the public hearing, it will not affect our property tax revenue amount, but it'll just cause non-tax revenues to go down, which is okay. We can go down, we just can't go up.
Yeah. So what are you asking?
Are you leaving it in or are you cutting it now?
Well, I prefer it not be there until we go through the discussion of the position itself. It's kind of putting the cart before the horse, in my opinion. And there's been a lot of time where we could have talked about this beforehand.
Okay. Bill, your opinion?
I'm not happy with the budget anyway. We don't have a 3% tax increase, which we sorely need, and the employees don't have a 3.5% COLA.
Okay, so specifically about this airport position.
That comes later. I mean, I do think, as Bruce said, we've got the cart before the horse again, and I'm not in favor of it.
So you want to cut that position then?
I didn't say that. We need to have a discussion.
We're having a discussion on Thursday.
Well, my proposal is to put it to a grade 12. I mean, it's in the budget. Put it to where it is right now, and then we can talk about why it needs to go to a 14. I'm happy to have that discussion. And if the rationale is good, then fine, we'll approve it. But what I don't understand is why we're being presented with the dollars first, as if it's a foregone conclusion, without us even looking at the position. And yes, I understand that the airport is self-sufficient and all of those things, but again, we have to look at the overall responsibility among other directors, deputy directors, what they're getting paid based upon that degree of responsibility. And we haven't had that discussion. And yes, HR might do that, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have the final say of looking at that, questioning it, and making sure it's correct.
Sylvia, I have a question for you. When new positions like this are put in the budget, do they always come before us in an HR meeting to approve the final job descriptions?
What we do typically during the budget season is we don't require them to fill out the reclass request because that's done through the budget process, and then all department heads come before the board and present their requests. I think it was back in June, so that item should have been brought forward hopefully in June. So then after you guys approve the budget, what I typically do is bring you a list. This is what the board had approved, and here's the list, and here's the changes. It's pretty similar to the spreadsheets that Brandy has provided to you up until this point. So that's how we've handled budgets over the years for reclasses or new positions. It's a little bit different through the budget cycle.
So let me ask you, why move aside from the reclass procedure? Why go outside of that just because it's budget season?
We handle it the same way in terms of our job evaluation, so.
Well, I understand that, but what I'm saying is why not get a reclass where you get two commissioners to sign it, like we did with transit, right? And then that way we've initiated reclassifying the job. Why abandon that procedure for this budgetary one that actually bypasses the board?
Yeah, we can implement that, absolutely. It's just been a practice that has been in place, and it's worked over the last 6 years since I've been here, but we can put that into place again.
See, to
and
me,
have you sign off on it. I think the reason it was probably bypassed is because then they come to you with their budget presentations, and we meet with the departments that are looking for reclasses or new positions, and their department head is or their EO is involved in those discussions. So they're on board with it.
Yeah, it just seems like a loophole to get around the board. Is what it comes across as.
And anything we can do to improve the process for the board, we're happy to do.
Well, it seems like we want to do stuff that is more above on the table versus behind the scenes, where you have to figure out which line item I've made a change to.
Maybe we schedule an HR meeting that's a little bit different than just the numbers in the future. That it's a meeting with HR and the auditor's office, and we go through each of the areas more specifically. I think that'd be a great strategy, so you have a better understanding. If you want the form signed off by 2 or the elected official, we could do that as well.
When were you first contacted to reclassify this position?
Prior to Gaston submitting the budget.
So what is that? March?
Probably, oh no, May, June, I can't remember our deadline dates at this point, but yeah, they had until, Brandy, do you happen to remember what date they had until to get those on the list?
The budgets were due to me by May 20th, I believe, and I think we had told departments to have their personnel requests to HR by like mid to end of April, so that HR had time to review them before the budgets got submitted to the auditor's office.
And we trust that our departments are communicating with their higher ups when they do these reclasses and any type of budget requests that they're making. But the forms could be implemented again.
Yeah, well, I think the issue is not so much that people aren't saying, hey, I'm thinking about doing something with a particular position. I think the issue is, well, how does that impact what's going on in that department and underneath for that elected official or officials, and then, of course, the county as a whole.
Yeah,
And it's those details that are never really there until the very end. And, you know, I think my first taste of this was being presented with a new org chart to approve, which would have triggered all these other events to occur within that business unit. And, you know, it doesn't seem like that's the correct way to be doing these things. And expanding and growing government and doing more of these things without us at least really having a meaningful discussion beforehand.
And we could modify the policy based on direction from the board on how you want that handled. And we can get that done quickly if you'd like. Yeah. We can bring forward the policy and see, you know, if there's some changes you'd like to make to how we do reclassifications and the process, the steps, and incorporate something a little different for budget season as well.
Yeah.
But in terms of the deputy director, that position had gone, it was either frozen or whatever, I think it was 2020, about the time where Phil retired, and then you guys brought it back last year, I think it was, and currently it's, as an interim, is being paid at a higher level than a grade 12.
Yeah.
But we looked at it and evaluated using our Korn Ferry method. And that's how it came to the difference in grade proposed to the board.
Well, what do you want to do?
Well, it sounds like you want to, and I don't even know where these numbers would come from, want to cut it as if it were down to a grade 12.
Well, we need to cut basically $19,806.
Well, haven't gotten to me yet because I already have a 42,000.
That's why I'm asking, what do you want to do?
Yeah. Well, I want to leave this in there because it's not spending authority. It's revenue neutral. It's not going to decrease any of our 19,000. I know tomorrow we are approving the mobile assessor. We're canceling the contract. We're not renewing the contract, but yet it's still in the budget. And so the assessor's here that we can talk to him about that. 42 to 44,000 wouldn't need to be in FY25. So that's one thing right there. So I don't know, assessor or Dyson, either one. So we can talk about that.
Commissioners, what's your question? Bayla Kovacs, Kootenai County Assessor.
On the business meeting tomorrow, we are letting the mobile assessor know that we are no longer going to be their clients, and yet their fee that we had budgeted for, 42 to 44,000, is still in your FY25 budget.
Yes, so we're timing it to obtain approval from the board to not renew the contract. We are at the renewal cycle, which is this year, 2024. It is our request to not continue that contract, and so we're timing it, and it just happens to coincide with the budget. So
Okay, so you're okay if we cut that amount from the budget?
it's actually my request that you do not renew it. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So now we are now in the black, so to speak. I do have another change.
And I would like to have an opportunity to speak to our budget at another later in this meeting, but maybe not at this juncture. So
Okay, more cuts?
no.
An addition?
Okay, if you're willing to entertain the question now, yes. So we had some funding that was supposed to be in our budget that this board authorized late in 2023, and for whatever reason, it never made it into our budget. Since I've been here, typically what happens is when we have a certain line item in our budget, and if it's a multi-year obligation, that those funds are then carried forward. Apparently, for whatever reason, since it was never entered into our budget, and I don't know what happened there. I don't know what your process is, but since it was never entered into our budget, it then therefore did not carry forward to fiscal year 2025 planning.
B budget or C budget?
B. And it's legal expenses, expenses for outside attorney services and expert witnesses. So there was some missing funding that just never made it into our budget.
Have you used any legal services up to this point since the board had given you a dollar amount?
Yes, we have. And I did give the board, I give you, Bruce, an update, and I don't know if you've passed that on to the other commissioners, but it gives a detailed update in some of the, with regard to some of the other cases that we have. We have more than one case pending, and as you may know, we can't really control how the lawsuits unfold, the timing of them, and so while you plan to have expenditures, you don't know if you're ever going to actually incur it until you do incur it.
So the email you sent was well in excess of 30 pages, right? And all I really, if there's really anything that needed to be done is to have a presentation for the board. I'm not the board. I am just a commissioner.
I understand.
Okay, I can't communicate with the other commissioners about what you send me unless it's in a public meeting.
No, I understand that.
Okay, so just real quick here.
Send
Hold on.
emails, and my purpose for sending you the information.
Mr. Assessor, I'm in the middle of speaking
My
here,
purpose for
okay?
let
sending you the
him
information
finish,
to
please.
give
I'm
you
sorry.
a upfront courtesy briefing.
The reality is, okay, that if money was spent, we're not aware of it, so we can subtract what money was spent. You already have a budget this year for legal fees, and whatever the difference is, we can adjust your budget that amount, okay? But we don't have any of that information unless, the auditor's office has that information. We can't figure out what that is. I don't know how much, you said you spent some. How much have you spent?
Well, so I'm not sure I'm following what you're saying. We did, if I may finish, we did have funds in our budget, fiscal year 2024, before this board authorized additional funds. So we had money there, right?
We authorized funds for 3 specific cases. and it was detailed out explicitly for you. For
You're
those
you're
three
not understanding
cases.
what I'm saying. There are other lawsuits that you're not aware of
Yeah,
that
but-
we have. And so
But
we
you're
have
not understanding
funding-
what I'm saying. The three cases is what I'm referring to, because that's what you're referred to in the very beginning, that you wanted this
Yeah,
board to
I'm referring
entertain
to all
today.
of them because it's one budget.
Well, I don't know what other ones you're referring to.
Well,
We-
the point, I mean, I don't know why we're quibbling over details here. I'm just giving the board the notice that the money wasn't in our fiscal year 25 planning. We still have the opportunity to advertise the budget to be accurate. I'm simply putting you on alert and notice that it's not there, and I think it should be added there for purposes of accuracy of our budget. That's
So
all this is.
Is that incumbent upon us to figure out those dollars, or is it incumbent upon you to give us the dollar amount necessary in order for you to have what you need?
How much do you want in that line item?
Do we need to go in executive session? Because this topic was about litigation.
Can you
and-
just give us a number?
Well, my concern is compromising our position in a public meeting.
This is not talking about specific cases. This is talking about a line item in FY25. It shows
Okay.
that you have $50,000 in a witness or
So we need
legal.
$115,000 is what should be there.
115?
Yes.
But you said you've already spent some money.
Correct. We've spent,
So are you asking for more than what we originally gave you?
no, I'm going back to what it should have been at the end of 2023 when it was infused, when we got additional monies. Should have been $115,000. Since then, and I'm going off of memory, we spent probably about $6,000 or
You've spent
$7,000.
You've spent 3,800 so far. Right?
3,800.
Yeah.
Okay. So it would be 115,000 minus 3,800.
Is this amount of money okay to come from reval, since it has to do with?
Well, I think it might be good to get a legal opinion. I mean, it does relate to valuation, so I think an argument could be made. It's up to the commissioners on how you fund it. It could come out of our restricted fund balance. So I guess I'm saying yes.
Okay. So at this point in time, I am comfortable leaving that line item the same. When we get more details specific to specific cases, we can go into the restricted fund balance and use that money to fund these items. We do have an executive session scheduled as soon as we can get Brandy on her way. That's where I would ask this.
Well, I agree with you on that. There is money set aside for that, a significant sum, and that's where it should be used or come from.
So depending on what time we get done here, there might be time in that executive session to discuss this, or I would just ask you to schedule another executive session.
So what executive session are you referring to?
The one that you just referred to, because you didn't want to compromise what you're using the
I'm
money for.
sorry, I was not aware that you'd schedule one, but
Yeah, it's on the agenda.
It's the next item here.
Yeah, we have 2 items so far. This would be a 3rd item, and that's why I'm just concerned about time. So,
okay.
thank you.
All right, so in FY24, they had budgeted 50,000 in that line. In FY25, they reduced it to 20,000. So currently in the FY25 budget, they have 20,000 in that line. And it sounds like I'm gonna leave it at that for the published budget. And then later, if you decide to use their restricted fund balance to increase that, that would just be a mid-year change in FY25.
Yes, but right now, we would just be increasing it for a guess of what it's going to cost, because I don't know how many months ago we approved the $65,000, and it hasn't been spent.
It was a long time ago,
Long
like
time.
December, I think.
Okay. All right, so that takes care of that. We are still,
So now, after the cuts to mobile assessor, you are $24,000 ahead.
okay. So I don't need to get any deeper than that on my stuff. I do have one change in parks and waterways. There is a lease, and I'm sorry, I can't tell you exactly what line item it is. It's $25,000, and that number just needs to be changed or transferred to the 8501 line item in parks. There's some upgrades and maintenance that needs to be done, and so I would suggest that be made. Nick is not able to join us, as you got his email, I hope, and so I'm handling this for him. So the 8501 is for maintenance of playground equipment and things of that nature that have been neglected since 2015. So I would ask that that change be made so it is completely budget neutral.
So that's a budget neutral, it would just be shifting the expense from one line to another. So that's
Yeah.
fine, we can do that. It won't affect the bottom line.
Okay. The only other thing would be search and rescue rent. We know that that amount is going up. I don't believe that it is reflected in the budget. And so I'm not sure, I have a couple ideas on where we can maybe get some of that additional revenue. But I hadn't had a chance to talk to who's the captain over search and rescue? Is that Captain Smart?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so there's, as of October 1, there's a reval happening, or it's not called that, but whatever the airport does every 5 years to look at that. So it's about $20,000. So is that something that we can talk about, a place to find the $20,000 to increase that lease?
I think we should absolutely look at being prepared for that if that's what's going to happen.
Okay. All right. And again, there's an executive session in this meeting that will speak to that specifically, so we'll have a little bit more detail on that.
So basically, we have 25,000 roughly in the black, Brandy?
Oh,
Yes,
So
correct.
that would cover that.
thank you.
So,
Please put it there.
so we should be fine. So we'll publish basically a few grand underneath the,
So you want to publish with the $24,000 in the black?
well, the 20,000 is going to eat that up.
Okay, so
Well,
it's,
I would ask that you just put all $24,000 there, because we don't have, I don't know that we have exact figures,
Okay.
so that would
so
be.
you want me to just plug that
And we'll have
remaining
the,
surplus to that lease
Yes.
line?
yeah.
Yes, search and rescue, yeah.
Okay. Perfect.
All right. Anything else? Well, I think there's one more thing. Lynn, did you want to speak? We got an email from Dr. Duke asking us to reconsider putting the coroner's lab back in. And then I would actually suggest, if the board wanted to do that, that we would use fund balance and not increase the interest revenue at this point. But
Lynn Sabito, Chief Deputy Coroner for the record. And we're here, Dr. Duke stated that he had spoke with you. We're just here to answer questions, I guess.
okay. And are you both familiar with the email I'm talking about that Dr. Duke asked to put it back in? And then Mr. Dunn is here, who has done the research.
We have not received the email, so we don't know what it says.
Oh, okay. Essentially, it just says he would like it added back in because that he feels that the research that has been done thus far on grants, that there have not been any found. And the best money for Kootenai County would be to build the lab and then go after the Coverdale, which would cover additional equipment, but even more important, it would cover salaries for the third-party consultant who would come in to actually do the autopsies. So that's all I have on that.
Well, I stand by what I said previously. If it turns out that we could have gotten the grant money, and that's something that you're willing to take responsibility for, then I am okay with it. All I was suggesting is that we use some prudence, that, we have the money, we can do this at any point in time. It's not a huge sum of money. It's not like a Justice Center expansion. And, my intention was to get this thing rolling once we knew for sure that the grant money would not work, because that's what was told to us in the beginning, then that we could use grant money, then we can't use grant money, the grant changed, all these things, these moving targets. And once we put it in the budget, we will automatically disqualify ourselves from any changes that may occur between now and next February, March timeframe. So if you're willing to own that, I'm willing to put that in the budget, but you have to take responsibility for that. I love that expression on your face. But
I can't take responsibility for somebody seconding my addition. I mean, you can't.
But you're
negate.
asking for a second vote, in essence. And so this is an opportunity to say, yep, in order to get that second vote, in order to get it on the budget, if it turns out that, we could have gotten a grant to help with some part of this construction, I had a bad error in judgment. As opposed to being prudent with the taxpayers' money, I ended up doing it, committing it, and disqualifying us from a particular grant.
I just would like to say that without having a grant person available to us, we don't know what grants are out there. We're death investigators. We're not grants people. We don't know. So without that information readily available to us, somebody looking at all of the grants all of the time, we don't know. And we can't say that with 100%. So, but I don't know what else to say as far as that goes.
So, Mr. Dunn, in your research that you've done, do you feel pretty confident that you've exhausted everything that was available to you in your limited capacity?
Yeah, so some of the grants that we are aware of, the Bureau of Justice Administration grant, and I believe the National Institute of Justice has grants that are available. They're also presented at the IACME committee, which is the International Association of Coroner Medical Examiners Office. They did bring up a few grants that we had looked at. As far as all the grants, I've also looked at the state of Idaho that has the commerce grants and things like that. I haven't found any that would suit that, but again, I'm not a grant writer, so I don't know exactly what we could kind of work our way into. But as far as funding, retrofitting and building, I haven't seen any that kind of fit in that realm.
I guess my concern with putting it off is if no grants do show up, we're way behind the eight ball. And the amount of research that has been done thus far, the information that was received at the International Coroners Conference, I mean, I would just be surprised if there were grants out there and they didn't tell you about them.
What does way behind the eight ball mean?
It means that it's already going to take a year to get this lab up and running. By the time you do design, by the time you do construction, and get ready to open.
Okay,
And
but what, I mean, are we in a crisis right now?
the crisis could happen any day. I mean,
It could
there's just
happen.
no way to know that.
See, I learned a long time ago that being conservative was working off of facts and not what could happen. There's so many different things that could happen. There's myriad things that could happen. So let's talk about probability, right? Because, let's face it, you fly an airplane, I fly an airplane. They don't always land the way they're supposed to, right? But that doesn't preclude us from flying airplanes because we know the probability of an adverse event is so low. So, what is this that's going on? What is impending here? I mean, I've spoken with other elected officials. We don't have a crisis at the sheriff's office or the prosecutor's office that I've heard. I've heard that, yes, we should get one, and I am for it. What I just don't want to do is preclude ourselves, automatically exclude if there is a grant. we can do it. But you're saying that we're in a crisis mode here, so I'd like to understand what that means.
Not crisis. I just think that with our growth and with the issues that have already happened at the Spokane Examiner's office, that it just puts us at greater risk if we delay this. So it's fine. If
Greater risk of what? I mean,
greater risk of having to go outside of our general area, greater risk of spending tax dollars to get what we need for prosecution, and greater,
we have the same issue because whether we have a facility or not, we still need to have a medical examiner. And that's expensive. And right now, finding a medical examiner is pretty darn hard.
except we have the third party that Dr. Duke is comfortable and confident that method would work for us.
Well, if you're referring to the one that lives next door, that's good today, but not necessarily tomorrow. And that's not how you make million-dollar decisions based upon what one person is. You have to look at it much differently and say, okay, what happens if we build this facility and all these other people that we have waiting in the wings just don't show up? Because a lot of things can change. I mean, we learned that with our PMR clinic.
I'm willing to keep it out of the budget, so maybe you guys can hire a grant writer to go find these grants. And then, if crisis happens and we're not prepared for it, then we'll just deal with it when it happens.
I think that the crisis that we speak of is more along the lines of pediatric cases specifically. Unfortunately, we have to deal with them. And with that being said, we do have a pediatric forensic pathologist in Spokane. It's just difficult to predict when those cases are going to happen. They're going to happen. It's inevitable. A baby is always a crisis, in our opinion. The cases that we deal with are becoming more frequent. They're more intense. They are more time-consuming for prosecution. They are difficult. I don't know that any kind of facility is going to be able to make that any easier at any time. However, this is my fourth coroner. This is my third coroner that wanted to start a lab and have a lab. And while I am in great support of it, I, of course, want it, need it in this county, but I want it done right. And I've said that all along. I don't know what the solution is. I don't know how you kick it down the road or you don't kick it down the road. The money's got to come at some point, but again, I want it done correctly. So that's my opinion.
Okay. Thank you. Bill?
My opinion hasn't changed. I've listened to Dr. Duke, and I was not convinced.
That we need one right now?
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, well, the thing is that Spokane did put a restriction on the number of autopsies, but they also increased that number recently. And so I don't see it being as much of a crisis. I do agree, though, that we should do this. And I don't have any intention of waiting one day longer until we can at least exhaust those options. And if we exhaust them, I am right there with you, Commissioner Duncan. I will vote aye on getting the money to it and getting this thing built. And I think we'll have a whole new set of issues once it's built. And we'll discover those because they never work out exactly how you have them on paper. They never do. And then we will discover what works best. We'll figure it out. And it'll probably take another couple years after that. And meanwhile, I don't see us necessarily dropping Spokane completely. It may end up becoming a hybrid of things.
All right, so is there a motion?
I move that we approve the preliminary balanced FY25 budget.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooks,
No.
Commissioner Matari,
Aye.
Chair Duncan.
Aye. And just clarification, that is to go to publish. So, Okay. With that, I would entertain a motion to enter into executive session.
I move that we enter into executive session pursuant to Idaho Code 74-2061D.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooks.
Aye.
Commissioner Matari.
Aye.
Chair Duncan.
Aye. Yeah. Who joined us by?
Hi there, it's Carlene again. I was kicked out.
Oh, yeah, no worries. We're going into executive session now, and the budget's going forward. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, have a good day.
Bye. Yeah, we can totally do you first. It's 11:17. Is there
Yeah, I move that we exit executive session 1D with staff to proceed as discussed.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooks.
Aye.
Commissioner Matari.
Aye.
Chair Duncan.
Aye. All right, public comment? Hearing none, 11:17, meeting adjourned.